Hi, and welcome to MCAG. My name is Stacie Guzman, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Merced County Association of Governments. If you're watching this, it probably means that you're new to the team, and you might even be wondering what you got yourself into. What is this MCAG, and what is it exactly that we do? So I'm hoping that I can walk you through a couple of slides that will help explain the mission of the agency, the umbrella of functions that we carry out here, and just help you feel like you have a good foundation to build a long career here at MCAG. So I'm just going to share my screen for a second. All right. So as I mentioned, MCAG is an umbrella organization, and the structure can be really confusing. So let's just get started with the basics. So MCAG is a joint powers authority that's now more than 50 years old. It was created by the 6 cities and the County of Merced, who are known as our member agencies, to address cross-jurisdictional issues that were common across the region. The agency was originally created as a regional transportation planning agency, which is the role that's most common to other agencies with similar names, like the Tulare County Association of Governments or the Stanislaus County Association of Governments. Those are our partners to the north and to the south here in the Valley that are regional transportation planning agencies. But over the years, the agency's role has expanded. It has become an administrative umbrella agency is the best way I can describe it. So while we continue with our core transportation planning functions, we also administer 3 other joint powers authorities. And those are the Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County, which we call the BUS, the Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority that we often call just RWA, and then the Yosemite Area Regional Transportation System, or YARTS. So with these additional roles, MCAG is really a unique agency. It's unlike any of the other COGs that you see up and down the Valley or even across the state. While our colleagues in these other regions might handle the transportation functions and a few other roles with maybe transit services, MCAG is really unique in that we operate 2 public transit systems and 2 landfills or waste management systems. So you can think of MCAG as this umbrella agency that encompasses and administers a handful of other agencies. And to help kind of lay out what this structure might look like, I promise that's what this is supposed to do. It looks complicated, but we're going to walk through it here. So this slide attempts to show the relationship between the agencies and the work programs. In total, MCAG has about 67 employees, and we handle about $80 million in public funds annually. There is this dark blue bar that goes across the top of the screen for administration. So these core functions, these core positions, these are about 13 staff positions that in their roles serve all of the agencies. So for example, I'm the executive director for MCAG, and as such, I'm then also the executive director for the BUS, for YART, for RWA as well. And that is true for our finance director, our human resources and risk management manager, our procurement manager, our admin positions. So all of us in this blue bar, these 13 positions, serve all of the agencies under MCAG. And then you look at the 3 green columns on the left, the joint powers authorities. These are those additional roles that I speak about. So the Transit Joint Powers Authority, or the BUS, and YART share staff. There's about 9 positions. That represents about 13% of our employees. And those 2 departments are under the transit manager. And for the BUS, that's about $12 to $14 million a year in an annual budget, with a capital budget that fluctuates, but is around $7 to $10 million. We're the only public transit provider in the county. We serve the entire region of Merced County. We offer fixed route and paratransit services, microtransit services, and we have a contractor that we work with that provide those operations and maintenance services. And you're going to learn more about the BUS from the transit manager in a different presentation. And then there's YARTS, also under the transit manager's department. It's a geographically larger system, but it is smaller in budget. It operates with about a $4 million annual budget. Capital has a very small capital budget that we're working. It's one of the priorities of the agency is to build YARD's capital budget up. It is a public transit service, but it operates in multiple counties into Yosemite National Park. So here in Merced, we operate up the 140, Highway 140 corridor into the park. And we also have the 120 service that comes out of Tuolumne County, out of Sonora. We have the 395 service that comes out of Mono County. And then we have the 41 service that currently operates from Fresno into Madera. So our member agencies are those that I just mentioned. And also, it has a separate governing board. We also have a contractor that provides operations and maintenance services, but all of the staffing and the administrative functions happen here at MCAG. And then there's the RWA, the Waste Management Authority. It is the largest of percentage of our staffing positions, about 60% of our total staff. It operates with about a $10 million annual budget with a very large capital budget. As you can imagine, projects at a landfill are significant in cost, and this includes a couple that we're underway right now, some expansion projects, the Valleyfield project, and potentially looking at landfill gas as a project with the UC to use as a renewable energy system. I will say that when it comes to understanding our regional waste functions, I think one of the most fundamental things we need to understand is that we aren't in the garbage collection business. We don't determine how much you pay as a resident of your particular city. We don't pick up your garbage at your curb. Those are all agreements and arrangements that happen within the city that you live in or the county. But when those trucks bring the waste over to our two facilities, either the one outside Merced at Highway 59 or the one in Los Banos, the Billy Wright landfill, once that waste is brought to us, then we're in the disposal service. So we take care of the garbage once it gets over into one of our facilities. And then lastly is our traditional transportation functions. So it's actually the smallest component of our work. It represents about 9% of our staff. We have about a $9 million agency budget. We do administer also Measure V, which is a half-cent sales tax measure that was passed by the voters in 2016. It's on the books for 30 years. But our core function in this part of our agency is that we receive state and federal funding to help projects get delivered. And when I say projects get delivered, it's helping jurisdictions complete their transportation priorities and transportation projects by being recipients of state and federal funding. We also coordinate with other transportation agencies across the valley on big issues like air quality and rail and Highway 99. And that's a partnership that we rely on heavily when it comes to achieving some of our big overarching goals here in the San Joaquin Valley. And then there are other programs we do that fall under that transportation function, but they're what I call add-ons. We have a federal legislative advocacy program called One Voice. We handle in-house GIS. We have the abandoned vehicle abatement program, and also we offer an annual scholarship to Merced County graduates called the Ana Maria Fuentes Scholarship. And the last thing I should mention about that last slide is that in terms of where these functions are carried out, you know, the bus, yards, and all of the MCAG functions are largely here out of our downtown office on 18th and K Street, and then the staff for RWA is largely at the Highway 59 landfill, where we have an administrative office, and then a few folks out at the Billy Wright landfill as well. And this is what those positions look like across all of those departments. So you can see there at the top is the executive director position, and then the second row of green, dark green positions are the executive management team. So you see the transit manager and that team that works under that position, and then the finance director, procurement manager, public affairs manager, the deputy director for transportation planning, the human resources and risk management manager, and then the director of RWA. That's the executive management team, and then hopefully you're able to look at this and find where your position fits in the team chart. So this is a slide that's intended to help understand the mechanics, how do I, as an employee, fit into the overarching governing structure of the agency, trying to help identify how all the pieces fit together. So the governing structure for MCAG, by default then, is also the governing structure for TJPA and RWA. Because of the relationship between MCAG being the umbrella agency administering TJPA and RWA, those three are all very synonymous. All employees are MCAG employees, and the governing board for MCAG is a governing board for the other two authorities as well. We're all one big agency. We just have different functions depending on what JPA your particular position is working under. So, but a little bit about the governing board. It is comprised of 11 elected officials. That's one from each of the 6 cities in Merced County and all 5 of the county supervisors. You can see there that we have legal counsel. That legal counsel's Hayden Law Office, which has served as the agency's counsel for many, many years, first with Robert Hayden and now with Emily Hayden. We have an excellent working relationship with the firm. And Emily works closely, mostly with our procurement department and human resources team, but she also coordinates any special legal counsel services that we need. It's important to note that legal counsel reports directly to the board. I work very closely with her, but that is a relationship directly to the governing board as opposed to an on staff or under contract on staff legal counsel. So I guess to describe the light green boxes there, it's best to talk about kind of the process of how we operate. So in terms of process, on a monthly basis, we staff, the entire staff, develop the monthly agenda packet. The governing board meets once a month, and that's first reviewed and acted upon by the Citizens Advisory Committee. These are members of the committee who are appointed by the governing board to provide insight and feedback on the transportation and transit components of the work that we do. And then based on the feedback that they provide, and staff presents those items to the CAC once a month, and then based on that, their action and that feedback, we develop the technical review board agenda. And that also now includes the waste management items. So the technical review board is comprised of all of the 6 city managers from those 6 jurisdictions and the county executive officer. So I think it's important to note that the TRB is the core group that we work very closely with. It is part of their their bosses, either a mayor or a council person, is who sits on our governing board. So in some ways, we are staff together. We're peers in a way, but they are an advisory board collectively to our full governing board. So we work closely with them individually and as a group just to make sure that, they're the best sounding boards for projects. They're going to have the best feel for, how a particular board member is going to react to something. So we develop strategies and work with them very closely. The TRB meets the second Wednesday generally of each month, and then their actions, you have the Citizens Advisory Committee, the Technical Review Board. Those 2 actions are then communicated and help inform the governing board packet. And I just mean the governing board packet, meaning the agenda packet for what we're asking the governing board to take action on. So the other 2 groups that I think warrant mentioning here that are mentioned on the slide, because their actions also report up to the governing board, are the SSPAC, the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, which is a community-based committee that comes together to identify and address any unmet transit needs, and that happens on an annual basis. And then the Measure V East and West Regional Projects Committees. There's an East Side Regional Projects Committee and a West Side Regional Projects Committee separately. And they are comprised of the directors, the governing board directors, whose who represents the geographies of those two areas, and the defining line being the San Joaquin River. So basically, the West Side Committee is all of the elected officials who are on the governing board who represent jurisdictions that are on the west side of the San Joaquin River, and the East Side Committee is all of the directors from the governing board who represent geographies on the east side of the San Joaquin River. And you'll learn more about that in a separate presentation from the Transportation Planning Department. And I should mention the most important function of those East and West Regional Projects Committees is that they make recommendations to the full governing board on how to allocate the Measure V regional dollars to projects in Merced County. And then also related, and I did not mention them, is the Measure V Citizens Oversight Committee. So they are appointed to the board, and they report to the public. So this is a committee that's considered like a watchdog committee in a sense. That was how it was how it was described to the public when they passed the Measure V program on the ballot in 2016. They review all of the expenditures of the Measure V program. So every penny that's spent, this committee looks at it to make sure it was spent appropriately and for purposes that are allowed under the Measure V expenditure plan. And then they produce with assistance through our public affairs team, an annual report called On the Move that reports out to the public how their tax dollars are being spent. And then, because I mentioned YARTS, and it does have its own governing board, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about how it's different, because its reporting structure is also different. So the YARTS governing board is comprised of 8 voting and 4 non-voting members. The voting members are the 2 supervisors from each of the counties that are members of the JPA. And so at the time of this recording, those are Merced, Mariposa, Mono, and Tuolumne counties. However, by the time you actually watch this, I'm hoping that Madera County is also an official member of the JPA. But for right now, the 4 non-voting members are 2 counties where we operate service, but they are not formal members of the JPA, and that is Madera and Fresno counties. Unlike the MCAG governing structure, YARTS only has 1 advisory committee, although it's similar to our Citizens Advisory. It's called the Authority Advisory Committee, or what we call is just the AAC. It's a committee of community members who have a lot of passion about YARTS. They come from all of the six counties that I mentioned, and they are very involved with staff and very involved in making their recommendations to the governing board. So you'll often hear us talk about discussing the YARTS items with the AAC and getting their feedback. And then lastly, I'll just mention that legal counsel for YARTS is also the Hayden, and similar to with the MCAG governing board, they report directly to the governing board for YARTS, and they also work closely with myself and our transit staff. And that concludes my MCAG 101 presentation. Again, welcome to the team. I hope you enjoy being part of this small but mighty agency. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Thanks.